"It hurts being without a man," the giant Apache girl said, the shy farmer. The sun had barely begun to rise over the flat fields when Thomas stepped out of his small wooden house. The air was cool, and the smell of wet soil mixed with the faint scent of wild grass. His farm was simple but well kept, a quiet place where he had spent most of his life. The fences were old but sturdy, and the rows of crops stretched in neat lines across the land. Thomas loved the calm of the early morning. It was the only time of day when he felt completely at peace. He moved slowly, carrying a bucket of water to the animals. The chickens clucked around his feet, pecking at scattered grains, while the cows in the field lifted their heads as he approached. Thomas had lived alone for as long as he could remember. He did not mind solitude. He liked the quiet, the steady rhythm of farm life, and the small satisfaction of seeing his work grow each day. Yet, sometimes, in the very early hours when the world felt still, he felt a hollow ache in his chest, as if something important was missing. That morning, something unusual caught his eye. A figure moved along the edge of the desert beyond the farm. At first, Thomas thought it might be a traveler passing through, but as she came closer, he saw that she was taller than anyone he had ever seen. She had long, dark hair that shone in the morning light, and her eyes were sharp but gentle. Her clothes were simple, and she carried a small bag over her shoulder. Even from a distance, Thomas could see that she was strong and confident, yet there was a hint of weariness in her step. The woman stopped near the fence and looked toward him. Thomas froze for a moment. He was not used to visitors. Most people avoided the desert edges, and travelers were rare. He noticed the way she scanned the farm, as if she were searching for something. Finally, she called out in a clear voice, "Excuse me, sir, could I have some water, please?" Thomas hesitated. His mind raced. What should he do? Part of him wanted to ignore her, to continue his routine. But another part, a quieter, kinder part, urged him to help. He set down his bucket and walked toward the fence, carrying a smaller container of water. "Here," he said softly, holding it out. The woman smiled gently. "Thank you," she said, and her voice had a warmth that Thomas could not ignore. She bent down to drink, careful not to spill a drop. As she straightened, Thomas noticed her height again. She seemed almost like a gentle giant towering over him, yet there was no threat in her eyes, only a quiet strength. "You must be very far from home," Thomas said, trying to keep his voice steady. She nodded. "I am traveling. It is not easy to be alone in the desert, but I manage." She paused, then added quietly, almost to herself, "It hurts being without company sometimes." Thomas felt a strange tug in his chest. He did not fully understand her words, but he sensed a loneliness in her that mirrored his own. He wanted to ask more, to know who she was, but the words got stuck in his throat. He could only nod. Could I rest here for a while?" she asked, gesturing toward the shade of the old oak tree near the fence. Thomas hesitated again, but the instinct to help won. "Yes, of course," he said. "You can rest there. There is some shade, and I have bread and cheese if you need food." She smiled a small, shy smile and walked over to the tree. Thomas watched her sit down, the morning sun casting a soft glow on her face. He felt both nervous and curious. He had never met anyone like her before. There was something about her presence that made his heart beat a little faster, though he did not understand why. After a moment, she spoke again. "I am Lena," she said simply. "I travel alone most of the time. It is not easy, but it is life." "Thomas," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I live here. This is my farm." They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the sounds of the morning, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves. The quiet was comfortable, not awkward, and Thomas felt a strange sense of connection to her. Lena looked around, her eyes lingering on the farm, the fields, and the fences. "Your farm is beautiful," she said. "It is peaceful here. I can see why you like it." Thomas nodded, unsure what to say. He was not used to compliments, especially from strangers. "It is simple," he said finally. "I work hard, and I try to keep it in order. That is enough for me." She smiled softly. Simple can be enough. Sometimes, simple is the best. Her words lingered in Thomas's mind, and he felt a warmth he had not felt in a long time. Over the next hour, they shared small conversations. Lena told him about the desert, about the people she had met, and the places she had seen. Thomas told her about his farm, about the crops, the animals, and the quiet life he led. The words flowed slowly at first, but then with more ease, as if the presence of each other made talking easier. At one point, Lena looked at him with a seriousness that made him pause. "It is strange," she said softly. "Even when I am surrounded by people, I can feel lonely. Out here in the quiet, it sometimes feels worse, but also clearer." Thomas nodded, understanding more than he could explain. He had spent so many years alone, and though he had grown used to it, he knew the emptiness she spoke of. There was a silent bond forming between them, one built not on words, but on shared understanding. As the sun climbed higher, Lena stood to leave. She picked up her bag and looked at Thomas. "Thank you," she said. "You are kind. It is rare to meet people who do not look away or ignore me." Thomas felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to say more, to ask her to stay, but the words did not come. "Take care," he said instead. "Safe travels." She smiled again and walked toward the edge of the desert. Thomas watched her go, feeling a strange emptiness as she disappeared from view. Yet there was also a spark of something new, curiosity, hope, and the faint beginning of a connection that neither of them fully understood yet. Thomas returned to his farm, but his mind stayed with her. He thought about her words, her height, her quiet strength, and the sadness that lingered in her eyes. He realized that even the strongest people could feel pain and longing. And perhaps he thought even a shy farmer could make a difference in someone's life by simply offering kindness. The morning went on, the routine of feeding animals and tending crops continuing as usual, but everything felt slightly different. There was a new awareness in Thomas's heart, a sense that life could change in small, unexpected ways. He did not know if he would ever see Lena again, but he knew that the memory of her, her presence, her voice, and the quiet honesty of her words would stay with him. By the time the sun was high in the sky, Thomas paused at the edge of the field. He looked toward the desert, hoping, perhaps foolishly, that she might appear again. For the first time in a long time, he felt a stirring of anticipation. Life had grown quiet and routine for him, but in that morning encounter, something had shifted. And though he did not yet understand it fully, Thomas sensed that the shy farmer and the giant Apache girl had begun a story that neither of them could have predicted, one of connection, understanding, and the subtle power of human kindness. Days passed slowly on Thomas's farm. The routine of feeding the animals, checking the crops, and repairing fences went on as usual, but Thomas felt a subtle change in his heart. He could not stop thinking about Lena, the tall Apache woman who had passed through his farm that morning. Her presence lingered like a soft shadow. Even in his quiet moments, he found himself remembering the way she had looked under the oak tree, the strength in her shoulders, and the hint of sadness in her eyes. It was unusual for Thomas to be so unsettled. He had lived most of his life alone and had grown used to solitude. He liked the rhythm of his daily work, the predictable patterns of planting, watering, and harvesting. Yet, Lena's visit had stirred something new within him. a curiosity, a desire to connect, and a quiet longing he could not explain. One morning, just a week later, Thomas noticed movement at the edge of his fields. He looked up and saw Lena again, walking toward him with her usual calm and confident stride. She carried her small bag over her shoulder, and her hair shone dark in the early sun. Thomas felt his chest tighten slightly, a nervous excitement he had not felt in years. "Good morning," Lena called softly as she approached. "Good morning," Thomas replied, trying to keep his voice steady. He carried a bucket of water for the animals but felt suddenly aware of every small sound. The clatter of the pail, the soft calls of the chickens, even the whisper of the wind through the grass. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," Lena said, stopping near the fence. "I was traveling this way and thought I might rest for a while." Thomas shook his head. "No, not at all. You're welcome. You can sit under the tree, like last time. I can bring you some bread and cheese if you'd like." She smiled faintly. "Thank you. That would be very kind." As she sat down, Thomas felt a small awkwardness between them, a quiet tension that was both uncomfortable and exciting. They had spoken before, but this time it felt different. The first meeting had been brief, a chance encounter. This meeting felt intentional, like a choice to connect. For a while, they simply watched the morning come to life. The sun climbed slowly in the sky, casting a warm glow over the farm. Birds flew between trees, and the soft sounds of the animals filled the air. Neither spoke much at first, but the silence was comfortable, a gentle companion rather than an empty void. Finally, Lena spoke. "I travel a lot," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Most of the time, I am alone. Sometimes it is easier to move without anyone, but sometimes it hurts." Thomas nodded, feeling a pang of empathy. He understood loneliness better than anyone. "I know what you mean," he said quietly. "I've lived alone for many years. It can be peaceful, but sometimes it feels empty." She looked at him then, her eyes meeting his. There was no judgment, no expectation, just honesty. "It hurts being without a man," she admitted softly, her voice almost a whisper. "It is not just about company. It is about having someone you can trust, someone who sees you for who you are." Thomas felt a strange mixture of surprise and understanding. He had expected her to speak of loneliness in general terms, but she was sharing a truth, a vulnerability. His heart beat faster, and he found himself wanting to say something that would comfort her. Yet the words would not come easily. Instead, he nodded and offered the small piece of bread he had brought. "Here," he said, "you should eat. Traveling can be exhausting," and she accepted it gratefully and began to eat slowly. Thomas watched her, noticing small details, the way she held the bread, the slight crease of concentration on her forehead, the quiet dignity in her posture. She was strong, yet she carried her loneliness with grace rather than despair. As they ate, they began to talk more freely. Lena shared stories of the places she had visited, the people she had met, and the difficulties of traveling alone. Thomas listened, captivated, occasionally offering his thoughts or sharing a memory from his own quiet life. He told her about the farm, about the simple joy of seeing a crop grow or a calf born. He spoke with more confidence than usual, encouraged by her patient listening and gentle attention. At one point, Lena asked about his life before the farm. Thomas hesitated, then admitted that he had lived in a small town with his family, but had always preferred solitude. He explained that the farm had become his refuge, a place where he could live according to his own pace and needs. "I can understand that," Lena said, her voice gentle. "Some people need quiet to think, to understand themselves. I have spent much of my life moving, always looking for something, though I'm not always sure what. Thomas felt a spark of recognition. He knew the feeling she described, an endless search for something undefined, something that could fill the quiet spaces in the heart. Maybe we are all searching, he said softly. She smiled, a small, shy smile. Perhaps. Or maybe some of us are just learning to be alone, even when we wish we weren't. They sat in silence again, but this time it was different. It was not awkward. It was shared. Both understood the weight of loneliness, both understood the need for connection, even if it was fragile and slow to form. Over the next few hours, Lena helped Thomas with small tasks on the farm. She lifted heavy sacks of feed with ease, fixed a broken fence post, and even helped tend to the chickens. Thomas was amazed by her strength and carefulness. He noticed that she worked not just with power, but with patience and care, paying attention to every detail. "Thank you," he said quietly, watching her adjust the fence. "You didn't have to help." "I wanted to," she replied simply. "Sometimes helping someone else makes the day feel lighter." Thomas felt warmth in his chest. He was unused to receiving help, especially from someone so formidable yet gentle. There was a feeling of trust growing between them, small but significant, like the first shoots of plants breaking through the soil. By the time the sun was high in the sky, Lena gathered her bag to leave. Thomas felt a pang of disappointment, but tried to hide it. "Will you come back?" he asked, almost hesitantly. She paused, considering. "I might," she said finally. "I like this place. There is a calm here I don't often find in my travels." Thomas nodded, a quiet hope rising in him. "You are always welcome here," he said softly. She smiled, and for a brief moment the distance between them seemed smaller. Then she walked toward the edge of the desert, her figure tall and strong against the horizon. Thomas watched her go, feeling the mixture of loneliness and anticipation again. He knew that her visit had changed something inside him. For the rest of the day, Thomas worked with a new awareness. Every task felt slightly lighter, every sound more vivid, every moment tinged with the memory of her presence. He found himself thinking about what she had said, about the pain of being without someone, and about the quiet connection that could grow between people, even in the most unlikely circumstances. When evening came, Thomas sat under the oak tree, looking toward the desert. The wind whispered through the grass, and the last light of the sun painted the fields in gold. He felt a small, steady hope, a feeling that life could hold more than just routine, that connections, even fragile ones, could appear when least expected. And somewhere beyond the fields, Lena walked on, thinking of the quiet farm and the shy farmer who had welcomed her. She carried his kindness with her, a memory that warmed her heart, even as the desert stretched endlessly ahead. In those shared moments, both Thomas and Lena realized something important, that even brief encounters could leave lasting marks, that human connection could grow slowly but surely, and that loneliness, while sharp and painful, could also lead to unexpected friendships. The day ended quietly, but the story between the shy farmer and the giant Apache woman had only just begun. The days on the farm continued in their quiet rhythm, but Thomas could no longer ignore the thought of Lena. Every morning as he went about his work, he wondered if she would appear again. He did not know why her presence affected him so deeply. Perhaps it was the honesty in her voice, the way she carried herself with strength, or the gentle sadness that lingered behind her eyes. Whatever it was, Thomas felt a pull toward her, a desire to see her smile again, to hear her speak, to simply be near her. One afternoon, as Thomas was tending to the crops, the wind began to change. A low, eerie hum filled the air, and the sky darkened with clouds. The desert wind had arrived, carrying with it a swirl of dust and sand that moved faster than he had ever seen. Thomas froze for a moment, the hairs on his arms standing on end. He had experienced storms before, but something about this one felt different. Sharper, stronger, more threatening. He ran toward the barn to secure the animals, pushing open the doors and guiding the cows inside. The chickens clucked loudly, huddling together, and the goats bleated in confusion. Thomas worked quickly, feeling a growing anxiety. The wind whipped through the fields, bending the crops and rattling the fences. Dust and sand stung his skin, and the sky grew darker, as if the sun had disappeared completely. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the edge of the field. It was Lena. Her dark hair whipped around her face, and her tall frame seemed almost unshaken by the storm. She moved steadily, carrying her small bag, making her way toward Thomas with determination. Despite the wind and sand, she called out, "Thomas, are you all right?" Thomas shouted back over the roar of the wind, "Yes, but the animals, this storm, it's strong." Without hesitation, Lena ran toward him, her long legs carrying her through the gusts with ease. Thomas felt a mix of relief and awe. She seemed fearless, as if the storm could not touch her. Together they worked quickly to secure the animals. Lena lifted sacks of feed with ease, helped close the barn doors, and guided the animals to safety. Thomas was amazed by her strength, but even more by her calm in the face of danger. Once the animals were secure, they moved to the farmhouse. The wind was so strong that it shook the wooden walls, rattling windows and doors. Inside, they could hear the howl of the storm outside, and Thomas felt a fear he had not known in years. He realized just how vulnerable his small farm was. Lena stood near the window, her eyes scanning the horizon. "This is a strong storm," she said calmly. "We must wait it out. It could last for hours." Thomas nodded, feeling the weight of her presence. She did not panic, and somehow that steadiness made him feel braver. He prepared some hot tea, and they sat near the fireplace, the wind rattling the house around them. The sound was frightening, yet the small room felt safe because Lena was there. As they drank the tea, Thomas finally allowed himself to speak. "I've lived here for many years," he said quietly, "but I've never seen anything like this. It feels endless." Lena nodded, taking a careful sip of her tea. "The desert can be harsh. The storms are part of its nature. We can only protect what we can and stay calm." She paused, then looked at Thomas with a small, knowing smile. "Fear is natural, but it is also temporary. We can endure more than we think." Thomas felt a new respect for her words. They were not just empty encouragement. They carried the weight of experience. He realized that she had lived a life full of challenges, traveling alone through harsh lands, facing dangers he could barely imagine. And yet, she carried no bitterness, only understanding. Hours passed, and the storm raged outside. Thomas and Lena talked quietly, sharing stories to distract themselves from the roar of the wind. Lena told him about her travels through mountains and deserts, about the people she had met, and about the moments when she had felt completely alone. Thomas listened closely, captivated by her courage and honesty. "You have faced so much," Thomas said softly, "and yet you move forward." I admire that." Lena smiled faintly, a small blush on her cheeks from the compliment. "We all face challenges, Thomas. It is part of life. Some endure more than others, but it is the strength we find in ourselves and in the people who help us that matters." Thomas looked at her, feeling a warmth he could not explain. I want to help you," he admitted, "even if it's just a little." Her eyes softened. "You already have," she said simply. your kindness. It matters more than you realize. As the storm began to lessen in the late afternoon, Thomas and Lena decided to check the fields. The wind had bent some of the crops and debris littered the ground, but nothing was destroyed. Thomas felt a relief mixed with admiration for how much they had accomplished together. He realized that their teamwork had been effortless, as if they had known each other for much longer than a few days. "I never expected to have help like this," Thomas said quietly as they walked among the crops. "I usually do everything alone." Lena glanced at him, her eyes thoughtful. "Doing things alone can be necessary, but sharing the burden, it makes us stronger. It also reminds us that we are not truly alone, even if it feels that way." Thomas nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He realized that he had felt lonely for so long, and yet the presence of another person, someone as strong and honest as Lena, could make that loneliness feel lighter, even if only for a moment. When they returned to the farmhouse, the storm had passed completely, leaving the air fresh and cool. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink as the sun began to set. Thomas and Lena stood outside for a moment, watching the colors change, feeling the calm after the storm. "Life can change quickly," Lena said softly, her eyes on the horizon. "One moment, everything is peaceful. The next, the world seems against you. We only have to stay steady and help each other when we can." Thomas felt a new understanding in her words. The storm had been frightening, but it had also shown him something important, that connection and trust could grow in the most unexpected situations. He looked at Lena, noticing the quiet strength that radiated from her. She had faced danger with courage and had shared her presence with him in a way that he would never forget. As night fell, they prepared a simple meal together in the kitchen. They laughed quietly at small mishaps, like spilling water or dropping bread, and the warmth between them grew. Thomas felt something he had never felt before, a sense of companionship, a bond that was forming through shared experiences, trust, and quiet understanding. Before Lena left that evening, Thomas walked her to the edge of the property. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything today. I don't know what I would have done without you." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the last light of the sunset. "And I thank you for letting me be here. Not many people would welcome a stranger, especially in a storm. You showed me kindness, and that is rare." Thomas watched her disappear into the distance, feeling a mixture of pride, relief, and a growing curiosity about what the future might hold. The storm had tested them, had forced them to rely on each other, and had shown Thomas the quiet power of connection. As he returned to his farmhouse, Thomas realized something important. Life could be unpredictable, and danger could appear without warning. But trust, courage, and kindness could bridge the distance between people. The shy farmer and the giant Apache woman had faced the storm together, and in doing so, had built a foundation for something new, an unspoken understanding that neither of them could ignore. That night, as Thomas lay in his bed, he thought of Lena's calm face during the storm, the strength in her hands, and the softness in her words. For the first time in years, he felt a quiet excitement for what tomorrow might bring, and a hope that their paths would cross again. And somewhere beyond the desert, Lena too thought of the quiet farm, the shy farmer, and the small moments they had shared. She felt a sense of warmth and trust growing between them, a realization that even in a harsh world, connections could form in the most unlikely places. The storm had passed, but its lessons remained: courage, trust, and the subtle power of companionship. And with that, a new chapter in their story quietly began. Days passed after the storm, and life on the farm slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The sun rose and set with familiar predictability. The animals went about their routines, and Thomas continued his work with steady hands. Yet something in his heart had changed. The memory of the storm and Lena's calm courage lingered, stirring a quiet warmth inside him that he could not ignore. It was early morning when Thomas saw her again. Lena appeared at the edge of the field, her tall frame silhouetted against the soft pink of the sunrise. She walked with her usual steady pace, but there was a subtle lightness in her step, a sign that she too looked forward to this encounter. Thomas felt his chest tighten, a mix of anticipation and nervousness. He wished he could speak more freely, yet his shyness made every word feel heavy. "Good morning," Lena called, her voice gentle but strong. "Good morning," Thomas replied, holding the bucket of water a little too tightly. He stepped aside so she could rest under the old oak tree. "It's good to see you again," he added, almost forgetting to breathe. Lena smiled softly and sat down, adjusting her bag beside her. "I wanted to come back," she said. "The desert can be lonely, but your farm, it feels different, peaceful." Thomas nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. "You are always welcome," he said quietly. He tried to look calm, but his eyes betrayed the nervous excitement he felt. For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the soft morning sounds, the birds singing, the wind moving gently through the crops, and the quiet lowing of the cows in the distance. The silence was no longer uncomfortable. It felt shared, a gentle space where both could be themselves without needing to speak. Finally, Lena spoke again. "Thomas, I've been thinking about what I said before, about being without someone to trust. I didn't mean to trouble you, but it's true. It is hard sometimes to be alone." Thomas felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to comfort her, to tell her that she was not alone anymore, but his words came out slowly, carefully. I understand," he said quietly. "I've lived alone for a long time. It can feel empty at times." Her eyes softened, and she nodded. "Exactly. Sometimes the strongest people feel the most alone. We can carry our own burdens, but sharing them makes life lighter." Thomas looked at her, noticing the subtle vulnerability in her expression. She was tall, strong, and confident, yet here, in this quiet moment, she allowed herself to show her loneliness. It was rare for someone to be so honest about their feelings. Thomas wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance that shyness had always created between him and the world. I want to help," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Even if it's just by being here." Alina's eyes met his, and for a moment Thomas saw a flicker of warmth and gratitude. You already have," she said softly, "just by letting me rest here, by talking to me, by trusting me. You've helped more than you know." Thomas felt a strange mixture of relief and joy. It was the first time in many years that someone had acknowledged him so directly, made him feel needed. He realized that her presence had already changed his life, that the bond forming between them was growing steadily, like a seed pushing through the soil toward the sun. They spent the next few hours together walking slowly through the fields. Hours. Lena helped Thomas check the crops, pointing out areas that needed extra care. They laughed quietly when a chicken ran between their feet, scattering the grain they were carrying. The simplicity of the work, combined with the shared effort, made Thomas feel closer to her than he had to anyone in years. As the morning turned to afternoon, Lena paused and looked at Thomas with a serious expression. Thomas, can I tell you something?" "Of course," he replied, a little nervously. She took a deep breath. "I've traveled alone for a long time. I've met people, seen places, and faced challenges, but I've rarely met someone who makes me feel calm, safe, comfortable. You do that for me, Thomas. And I think I've been needing that more than I realized. Thomas felt his heart race. Her words were honest and unguarded, and they carried a weight that made him both nervous and thrilled. He wanted to tell her how he felt, to let her know that her presence had changed him too, but the shy part of him hesitated. I feel the same, he said finally, his voice trembling slightly. I've lived quietly, and I never expected someone like you to come into my life. But you have, and, it matters to me. Lena's expression softened, and a small smile appeared on her lips. That is nice to hear, she said quietly. I was afraid you might not feel the same. Thomas shook his head gently. I do, more than I can say. He took a deep breath, feeling a courage that he had not known he possessed. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to be here with you. Even if it's just this farm, this place, these moments. Lena's eyes glistened, and she reached out to touch his hand lightly. I would like that too, she said. Her voice was soft, almost shy, yet there was a strength in it that made Thomas's heart soar. They spent the afternoon sitting under the tree, sharing stories, dreams, and quiet confessions. Lena spoke of her life in her Apache community, the places she had seen, and the friends she had lost along the way. Thomas shared memories of his childhood, the farm, and the moments of loneliness that had shaped him. Each word brought them closer, weaving a quiet bond of trust and understanding. As the sun began to set, painting the fields in shades of gold and orange, Thomas and Lena sat side by side, feeling the calm of the evening. The world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, the farm and the soft whispers of the wind. Thomas, Lena said, finally breaking the comfortable silence, I am glad I met you. You make this place brighter. Somehow, even when life is hard, you make it feel lighter. Thomas looked at her, feeling a warmth that spread through his entire body. And you make my world different, he admitted softly. I never thought someone like you would come into my life, but I am glad you have. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the unspoken emotions between them as powerful as words. There was trust, admiration, and a quiet affection that had grown slowly over days and weeks. Both understood that this connection was fragile, yet precious, a bond formed through honesty, shared experience, and the willingness to be vulnerable. As night fell, Lena prepared to leave, but she did not move quickly. She lingered, as if reluctant to step back into the world outside the farm. Thomas walked her to the edge of the property, feeling a nervous anticipation. Will you come again? He asked softly. She smiled, a small, shy smile that made his heart leap. Yes, she said. I want to, and I hope we can continue to share these moments, to be here for each other. Thomas nodded, feeling a quiet joy that he had never known before. I would like that very much. As she disappeared into the distance, Thomas felt a sense of hope and excitement. The shy farmer and the giant Apache woman had crossed a new threshold in their relationship. They had shared confessions, feelings, and honest emotions. The connection that had begun with kindness and curiosity was now deepening into something more profound, a bond built on trust, understanding, and the subtle power of human companionship. That night, as Thomas lay in bed, he thought of Lena's words, her gentle smile, and the warmth of her presence. For the first time in many years, he felt truly seen, truly understood. And somewhere far away, Lena thought of the quiet farm, the shy farmer, and the safety she had found in his company. Both knew that their story was only beginning. that the days ahead would bring new experiences, new challenges, and new opportunities to deepen the bond that had formed between them. The evening was quiet, the stars shining softly in the sky, and both Thomas and Lena felt a shared sense of hope. They had discovered something rare, a connection that could withstand distance, shyness, and the challenges of life. And with that realization came a quiet promise to continue, to be present, and to see where this bond could take them. The days turned into weeks, and the farm settled into its usual rhythm. But now Thomas felt a difference in every moment. His mornings were no longer only filled with the quiet routines of feeding animals and tending crops. They were touched with anticipation. Every movement in the distance, every shadow along the fence line, made his heart beat a little faster, hoping it was Lena. Lena had returned often since that last conversation under the oak tree. Each visit was a small celebration, a chance to share meals, stories, and quiet companionship. Their bond had grown slowly, carefully, like a plant that needed sunlight, water, and time to bloom. Thomas had learned to understand her subtle moods, the way she smiled when she was pleased, and the quiet sighs she released when thinking of distant memories. Lena, in turn, had come to notice his shy glances, the careful way he offered help, and the warmth in his words that betrayed more than he often admitted. One morning, Lena arrived at the farm just as the first rays of sunlight touched the fields. She carried a small basket with fresh fruit, a gift from her recent travels through a nearby town. Thomas greeted her with a smile, feeling a rare lightness in his chest. "Good morning," he said softly. "Good morning," she replied, her voice gentle yet filled with a quiet joy. "I thought we could share some breakfast together before the day begins." They sat under the oak tree, the morning air crisp and clean. As they ate, they spoke quietly about small things, the weather, the state of the crops, and memories of past places Lena had visited. But beneath the light conversation, there was an undercurrent of understanding, a silent recognition of how important they had become to each other. After breakfast, Thomas suggested they check the fields together. "Some of the crops need extra care," he said. "I'd like your help." Lena smiled, rising to her feet. "I'd be happy to help, and maybe we can enjoy the morning while we work." But as they walked side by side through the rows of crops, Thomas felt a courage he had not known before. He found himself talking more freely, asking questions about her travels, and listening intently to her stories. Lena shared tales of her journeys through deserts, mountains, and small villages. She spoke of people she had met, challenges she had faced, and moments when she had felt utterly alone. Thomas listened, amazed at her resilience, and yet he also noticed the quiet vulnerability she revealed in her words. "You have seen so much," he said softly, "and yet you share it with me as if I were someone who could understand. That means a lot." Lena's eyes softened, and she reached out to lightly touch his arm. "Because I trust you, Thomas. You listen, you care, and you let me be myself. That is rare." The simple honesty of her words touched him deeply. Ah! Thomas realized that he, too, had grown to trust her in a way he had never trusted anyone. She had become a presence he looked forward to, a companion who had brought color into his quiet, routine life. Later that afternoon, they sat together by the small pond on the edge of the farm. The water was still, reflecting the blue sky above. Lena threw small stones into the pond, creating ripples that spread outward. Thomas watched her, feeling a warmth he could no longer ignore. "Thomas," Lena said quietly, "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About traveling alone, about the people I've met, and about how it feels to have someone who cares. I am glad I found this farm, and I am glad I met you." Thomas felt his heart race. He wanted to speak, to tell her how much she meant to him, but his shyness made the words stick. After a moment, he managed to say, I feel the same. You've changed my days. My world feels brighter because of you. A small, genuine smile spread across Lena's face. I was afraid you might not feel the same, she admitted. I've been alone for so long that I didn't know if someone like you could care about someone like me. Thomas stepped a little closer, his hands trembling slightly. I do care, more than I ever thought I could. They sat together in quiet for a while, letting their words settle. There was no rush, no need to force emotions. They simply existed in that space, side by side, connected by the small, unspoken understanding that had grown between them over days and weeks. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, Thomas and Lena returned to the farmhouse. The light of evening made everything look softer, calmer, and somehow more intimate. Inside, they prepared a simple dinner together: bread, cheese, and fresh vegetables from the garden. They laughed quietly at minor mistakes, like spilling a little water or dropping a slice of bread, and each moment added to the comfort they felt with one another. After dinner, they sat by the fireplace, the warmth and flickering light creating a peaceful atmosphere. Lena spoke softly about her life as a traveler, her need to see the world, and the loneliness she had carried for so long. Thomas listened, offering gentle encouragement and honest acknowledgement of her experiences. You've taught me something important, Thomas said finally, his voice calm but firm, that it's okay to trust, to share, to let someone in. I never knew how much that could matter until I met you. Lena reached out, holding his hand lightly. And you've taught me that even when life is hard, connections can be found in unexpected places. That trust and kindness, they can grow slowly, but they endure. They sat in quiet, the fire crackling softly. Thomas realized that he had never felt this level of comfort and companionship before. Lena had become a part of his daily life, not just as a visitor, but as someone who mattered deeply. And he knew that she felt the same. Before leaving that night, Lena stood at the edge of the property, looking at the sky filled with stars. Thomas walked beside her, feeling a mixture of excitement and calm. I'll be back tomorrow, Lena said softly. I don't want to be far from here. This place and you mean more than I realized. Thomas smiled, feeling a sense of completeness he had not known before. You are always welcome, he replied. I want you here as much as you want to be. She gave him a small, warm smile and nodded. Good night, Thomas. Good night, Lena, he said, watching her disappear into the soft moonlight, feeling a quiet joy in his heart. The days continued in this way, each visit bringing them closer, each shared moment deepening their bond. They worked together, laughed together, and quietly supported each other through the simple challenges of farm life. There was no need for grand gestures, just the steady presence of one another, the comfort of shared experiences, and the growing understanding that they had found something rare and valuable. One evening, as they sat under the oak tree watching the sunset, Lena spoke softly. I think I am no longer afraid of being alone. Not when I know there is someone who cares, who understands, and who wants to share these moments with me. Thomas felt a deep warmth in his chest. Neither am I, he admitted. I used to think my life would always be quiet and lonely, but with you here it feels fuller, brighter. They sat together as the sky darkened, feeling the gentle comfort of each other's presence. The shy farmer and the giant Apache woman had found trust, friendship, and a quiet love that needed no words to be understood. It was a connection built on honesty, kindness, and the slow, steady growth of human companionship. And though the world outside the farm remained unpredictable, Thomas and Lena knew one thing for certain. They had found a place, a bond, and a sense of hope that would endure. The farm was no longer just a quiet, routine life. It had become a home filled with shared moments, laughter, and a deep understanding between two people who had once been alone. In the simple act of being present for one another, they had discovered the power of trust, the beauty of connection, and the quiet joy of companionship. The sun set completely, leaving the stars to shine above the farm. Thomas and Lena sat side by side under the oak tree, feeling the calm of the evening and the certainty that, whatever the future held, they would face it together. The shy farmer and the giant Apache woman had found each other, and in doing so had created a story of hope, trust, and the gentle strength of human connection.